Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. We've got this great collection of sources you sent in notes, bits of research, really fascinating excerpts.
Yeah, and today we're diving into a really significant chapter. It's part of a journey many people know, but maybe not this specific part in quite this detail.
Right, we're focusing on Siddhartha's time with that group known as the Five Companions.
Exactly. It wasn't, a huge amount of time in the grand scheme of things, but it was absolutely pivotal, really defined by this intense shared austerity.
And it happened just before a huge breakthrough for him.
Precisely. The material we're looking at zeroes in on this period. It explores what happened after his initial solitary searching, his time with other teachers.
And then he finds himself with these others, people who shared that same almost extreme commitment.
It's a really interesting turn, isn't it? Because the sources suggest that after exploring different philosophies, different meditation techniques, he shifted focus dramatically.
Towards pushing the body's limits?
Yes, towards intense self-mortification. And it was right in the middle of that phase that he met these 5 specific individuals.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive, using these notes, is to really get a handle on, well, first, what brought them together, these really committed seekers.
And what was their life actually like? Sharing these extreme practices, what did it feel like day to day?
Yeah, and then that crucial moment when, their paths just split, completely diverged.
Right, and how that split, which seemed so final at the time, actually, surprisingly, kind of set the stage for a reunion later on, a pretty powerful one.
So we're exploring, community versus the individual path in these intense practices, the challenge of it all, and finding your own way, ultimately.
And what really jumps out from the sources is that Siddhartha didn't just stumble upon them, or they him. These 5 were already very deeply committed practitioners in their own right.
Kananya, Bhatia, Vapa, Mahanama, and Asaji. Is that right?
That's them. Known for really rigorous austerities already. They weren't beginners.
So they were on a similar track. What was it about Siddhartha then at that point? What drew them to him, according to the notes?
It seems to boil down to his sheer resolve, his intensity. They saw something, extraordinary in his dedication to this really severe path.
Ah, okay. So they thought if anyone can do this, achieve liberation through this method, it's him.
That seems to be the sense of it, yes. That was their belief.
And so they decided, okay, we're joining him, all 5, sharing these extreme practices.
They basically formed this small, incredibly intense unit, all focused on pushing the boundaries of human endurance together.
And the sources mentioned this fits into a wider context, right? In India at the time.
Absolutely. The idea of spiritual groups, fraternities, sharing austerities, it had a long history. It wasn't unusual. So their decision would have resonated. It made sense within that cultural framework.
Okay, so they're together. They've formed this group, driven by this shared belief, Siddhartha's potential. What did it actually look like? The notes are pretty vivid, you mentioned.
They are. And this went on for 6 years, which is quite a long time for this level of intensity.
6 years, wow. So their daily life just consumed by these severe practices.
Completely. The sources describe, the most extreme forms of self-mortification you can really imagine.
You mentioned extreme. Can you give us some specific examples from the notes? What kind of limits are we talking about?
Well, the notes are quite stark, really. They talk about starving themselves almost to death.
Seriously?
Yeah, eating just minimal amounts, sometimes literally a few grains of rice, maybe some seeds per day. The descriptions paint this picture of bodies becoming, skeletal, barely alive.
Just skin and bones.
Pretty much. And beyond just the lack of food, were there other things?
Oh, yes. Subjecting themselves to, extreme heat, extreme cold, sleeping on beds of thorns is mentioned.
Thorns, good grief, enduring immense physical pain in all sorts of ways. The idea behind it all, their shared belief then, was that by completely mastering or maybe conquering the body,
they could free the spirit.
That was the goal. Liberate the spirit from the physical.
It's hard to even picture that level of dedication, but thinking about the human side, as you read these accounts, there must have been some kind of bond, right? A unique camaraderie in that shared suffering.
You'd have to assume so. While the sources focus heavily on the practices, they do imply that collective drive. Pushing each other, supporting each other in this shared goal, even as their bodies were, frankly, wasting away.
So it wasn't just 5 individuals doing their own thing side by side. It was a collective project.
Exactly. A shared project towards what they believed was the ultimate truth. That paradox is fascinating: intense individual suffering, but within a group pursuit.
Which leads to the big question, doesn't it? This was their path, the one they'd all committed to. But was it actually working for Siddhartha himself, according to the sources?
And that's precisely where the story takes its crucial turn. The material is clear on this. Despite all the effort, the shared dedication, Siddhartha had this critical realization that this path, this extreme austerity, it just wasn't leading him where he needed to go. It wasn't bringing the profound liberation he was searching for.
So the very thing they thought was the key, he found it was actually getting in the way.
Exactly that. The sources suggest the extreme suffering wasn't producing clarity. It was actually clouding his mind, making him too weak, physically and mentally, for genuine insight. And this is where we see him starting to grasp intuitively something different, something more balanced, what eventually becomes known as the middle way.
And there was a specific action, wasn't there? Something that really marked the shift for everyone else.
There was.
Yeah.
And from their perspective, it must have been, well, shocking. The sources pinpoint the moment he accepted an offering of milk rice from a village woman, Sujata.
Accepting food. After 6 years of starving together. How did the others take that? What did the sources say their reaction was?
Utter dismay. That's the word the notes convey. Utterly dismayed. For them, his accepting nourishment, stopping the extreme fasting, it was unambiguous.
They saw it as failure.
Completely. A lapse in commitment. They thought he'd lost his nerve, his spiritual resolve.
Yeah.
That he was, giving up and going back to a life of comfort. That's how they saw it.
And the result of that misunderstanding, based on the notes, was pretty immediate and drastic.
Oh, absolutely. They left him, just abandoned him right there.
Wow. That must have been incredibly isolating for Siddhartha.
You imagine so. The sources sort of paint this picture of him being physically stronger now, having taken food, but completely alone spiritually, cut off from the people who'd been his companions in this intense struggle for so long.
And where did they go, the 5 companions?
They left him and went to Isapatana, that's modern Sarnath. And there they just continued with their severe practices.
It really underlines how hard it is to break from the group, doesn't it? From those shared beliefs, even when you're all supposedly seeking truth, their view was fixed.
Their understanding was set, yes, while Siddhartha's own direct experience was forcing him to evolve, to see something new.
And maybe, in a way, that separation was actually needed.
The sources definitely imply that. Difficult as it must have been, it seems that parting gave Siddhartha the space he needed. Room to really explore and fully realize the middle way on his own terms.
Without the pressure of their expectations, their path?
Exactly. Without that influence. He needed that solitude then to solidify his own breakthrough, his unique path.
But as you mentioned earlier, that wasn't the end of the story for the 5 companions. That separation wasn't final.
No, absolutely not. And this is where the narrative in the sources comes full circle in, well, a really powerful way. Because these same 5 men who left him, believing he'd failed, they actually became his very first disciples after he attained enlightenment.
Get out. The very ones who completely misunderstood that crucial turning point. They were the first ones he taught, the first to accept the Dharma.
The very first. The sources make a point of this reunion. It suggests that their shared journey, even through the hardship and the divergence, somehow prepared them. It laid the groundwork for them to reconnect with him later.
What is it about their experience, do the sources suggest, that might have made them receptive when he finally found them again?
Well, it's compelling to think, isn't it, that their deep familiarity with suffering, having pushed those extremes for 6 years, maybe that made them uniquely able to grasp the truth, the profundity of the middle way when he explained it. They lived the failure of one extreme, perhaps?
So they were ready to hear about a different way. Their shared past, even the difficult parts, somehow prepared them.
It seems that way. The path they shared, its intensity, its eventual divergence, ultimately helped them understand his message when they encountered him again, enlightened.
So this whole story, Siddhartha and the 5 companions, as we see it in these notes, it's really quite a testament, isn't it? To shared struggle, to different paths being necessary sometimes.
And ultimately to how real understanding, real truth, can bring people back together, even after deep disagreement or separation.
So thinking about this, what does this deep dive mean for you, listening? It really makes you consider that that tension between community, finding your group, and those essential solitary moments you sometimes need for your own breakthroughs.
Yeah, and it challenges you to think about how hard it can be to question beliefs you hold deeply, or beliefs held by people you're journeying with. people you respect.
Right. And it makes you reflect on how our past experiences, even the really tough ones, the ones that cause breaks or separations, how they can actually shape future connections in ways we don't expect.
They might even lead you back to people you thought were on a completely different path.
So here's a final thought to maybe mull over, stemming from this dive. How do we manage that balance between our collective journeys with others and those moments where we absolutely need to step away alone to find our own clarity?
And maybe even, like the five companions, consider how the people we diverge from on one stage of the path might just be the ones waiting to connect on the next.